I heard the report months ago that this movie was going to open with the title card, "No generative AI was used in the making of this movie." But it does not, in fact. It's a based idea, though. Filmmakers everywhere wear that like a badge of honor. Avatar: Fire and Ash is the third installment in James Cameron's passion film series on the moon of Pandora. Jake Sully and his family have established base with the Water Clan while mourning the death of Neteyam, and meanwhile Colonel Quaritch joins with the Na'vi Ash Clan who have turned their backs on Eywa, and the two alliances go head-to-head. To give my background with these movies, the first Avatar blew me away when I first saw it in theaters at 15. It really felt like a once-in-a-decade cinematic event. 13 years later, Avatar: The Way of Water equally wowed me. Narratively, it was a little lackluster, up until the last half hour when the story really kicked into high gear and left on a satisfying cliffhanger. So I went into Avatar: Fire and Ash pumped. I sat down in the IMAX theater and put on my 3D glasses, ready for it. And I came out somewhat underwhelmed. Is all the CGI work a rich and amazing sight to behold? You know it. And all the technology and human labor that it takes to bring it to life cannot be underpraised. However, if you've noticed, I'm less enthusiastic about reporting that than I was with Avatar 1 and 2. I remember going into The Way of Water wondering if I would just be numb to the visuals because by then I had become well acquainted with the first movie. But quite the contrary, because The Way of Water took us to a new region of Pandora with new marvelous sights in the ocean, resulting in a whole new experience. My reaction to Fire and Ash is more what I thought it was going to be with The Way of Water. Just, yeah, it's pleasing to the eye, but it's mostly what we've seen before. It's only for about 10 minutes that the movie goes into this new Ash Clan's village at the foot of a volcano. With a movie titled Fire and Ash, I was naturally expecting a lot more fiery imagery. Sure, the trailers didn't really promise any of that, but I thought, maybe they're just saving up the most incredible visuals for the full presentation in the theater. But that's not the case. Usually the film still succeeds in being immersive when the camera is following the characters at their eye level, whether they're pushing their way past huge ferns or riding river rapids. And the best action sequence is early in the movie when the Ash people raid a convoy of floating ships hauled by stingray-like creatures. Stylistically, it's a little different than what we've seen, and it's great to watch in IMAX 3D with all the sparks flying past your face. All in all, though, I don't see myself rewatching Fire and Ash nearly as much as the first two. I always go back to see the first two in IMAX 3D when the chance comes. And I realize that part of it is because the memory of how they amazed me on my first viewing will never leave me. Just like with Jurassic Park, I've seen that movie possibly 100 times, and it never loses its effect. And part of it is because the memory of the awe-inspiring feeling it first gave me will never be shaken, and each repeat viewing only brings it back. I really didn't get that with Fire and Ash, and therefore it has far less rewatch value for me than the first two movies. But what about the characters and story? Because that was actually one of the things that was at the top of my mind going into this movie, much more so than before. And I will say this much, I liked the characters' setups, primarily with Neytiri. Everything that the humans took from her, including one of her sons, further inflames her hatred toward humans, to an extent now that it even bleeds into how she looks at her own husband and children, because Jake is permanently one with this avatar that was made with human DNA, which means that her children too have some human blood in them. And this especially affects how she feels about Spider, who's fully human, Quaritch's son no less, regardless of how he's grown up alongside Neytiri's children, like he's one of them. It makes you look back at The Way of Water when she threatened Quaritch with killing Spider, and you think, she very well may not have been bluffing. And I love that even though Jake has become a family man in a new world, a drastically different life than what he had before, you can clearly see he's still got that US Marine spirit in him. It's the villains who are the highlight of the movie. Una Chaplin is having a blast playing Varang, the slithering and menacing leader of the Ash Clan. And Stephen Lang is at his best here as Quaritch. When he goes into Varang's camp to speak with her, he has a sniper take out one of her people to show her what she's dealing with, and she thinks nothing about losing that person. She just loves Quaritch's spirit. And from there, the two of them start a military partnership and an intimate relationship that's both weird and engaging. They're a great antagonistic duo. But even for how cool Varang and her tribe are, they eventually come across rather inconsequential when all's said and done. They just become background fodder in the third act. Heck, I don't even remember what happens to Varang in the end, whether she dies or gets away. It's very strange, too, that no one in the Sully family ever finds out that Spider saved Quaritch's life at the end of The Way of Water. I'm all for a protagonist making a big, hasty decision, as long as the outcome and the effect it has on said character are thoroughly addressed. But there oddly seems to be a trend lately of movies and shows neglecting to do this. Take Maisie at the end of Fallen Kingdom when she freed the dinosaurs into the world. I understood completely why she would do it, and I was looking forward to seeing how that would affect her in Dominion, only for it to not affect her in the slightest. Or in Ahsoka, when Sabine hands the map over to Baylan Skoll, which eventually amounts to Grand Admiral Thrawn invading Sky River Galaxy again. As the show goes on, both Sabine and Ahsoka barely feel any of the weight from that decision, and Ezra, whom Sabine did it for, is none the wiser. Maybe it will be more adequately dealt with in Season 2, but I'm not holding my breath. It feels much the same here with Spider and what he did. You'd think the reveal of that move would add more to Neytiri's internal conflict, but the only other one who ever knows about it is Quaritch himself. He mentions it fleetingly once, and the most it elicits from Spider is just, yeah, I'm kinda wishing I didn't. The other thing that had my interest in The Way of Water that's carried over in this movie was Kiri. I had certain predictions as to what we would eventually find out about her, and in Fire and Ash, it turns out I was absolutely right. I mean, once you've gotten the gist of the spirituality of Pandora, it wasn't too hard to figure out what Kiri was. So what does the story do with this reveal? Well, Kiri performs a certain thing for Spider that has the RDA coming after him for their own purposes, and not much beyond that. Anyone who is looking forward to a profound payoff to Kiri's identity will probably have to keep waiting for future installments. Speaking of Pandora's spiritual metaphors, there's another scene that I think was going for an Abraham and Isaac parallel, but I couldn't help but think, this scene would have worked so much better with just one alteration. Swap out a certain character involved in this moment with another certain character. Just do that switch, and this really would have been powerful. As is, it's kind of hollow. Ultimately, the narrative issue with this movie, especially with the added context of The Way of Water, is that it's got good character setup, but all of it amounts to no strong emotional payoff. And despite all the talk from the cast and crew about how this movie would feel like the cap of an era even with more sequels on the way, I really didn't get any sense of finality from it, and instead I was left feeling that we're still in the status quo. Now, I try to stay away from reviews for a movie as much as I can before seeing it myself, because I want to feel like I'm making my own observations without looking for the things that others say about it. But there are instances when it can't really be helped. And one thing that I kept hearing from people who saw the movie early is that it repeated too many plot points from The Way of Water. For the first 2/3 or so, I wasn't really seeing it, but once it got to hour 3, particularly with scenes involving the Tolkun, that's when I thought, okay, now this has become too much like Way of Water. The climactic final battle is another case of this. The first movie had the awesome air battle with the choppers and mountain banshees, and the second movie had the battle at sea plus that incredible shipwreck escape. The climax of Fire and Ash is basically just those two slapped together, only minus that fantastic shipwreck, and it didn't grab me. What this repetition clearly stems from is that James Cameron originally intended for this and The Way of Water to be one movie, but he ultimately decided to split it in two. And that fact is not very well hidden. Like Africa and South America, it's easy to see how they were once together. My deductions are that Jake and his family learning the ways of the Water Clan was supposed to happen at the same time that Quaritch teamed up with the Fire Na'vi, a yin to the yang. There was just going to be one battle with the Tolkun at sea, in which Mick Scoresby dies rather than just having his arm taken off, and there was never going to be any Spider rescuing Quaritch from drowning. At least those are my educated guesses. And man, looking back at The Way of Water, we were really hit too early with this blood-pumping moment.
You're not leaving, are you, Jake? I'm coming for you. When I do, I'll kill your whole family.
Dad!
The Let's get it done.
Pacing-wise, I'd say this movie is a little tighter than The Way of Water, but not by much. 3.25 hours is still pretty excessive. And in the end, I do think it more logical to have just stuck with that one long movie. But James Cameron successfully persuaded the studio with the prospect of making another $2 billion. So Fire and Ash is my least favorite of the 3 Avatar movies. Make no mistake, the effort put into the effects is still worthy of praise, as always, and the villains are a greater strength here than before. It's mostly just the last third that really drug it down for me. To build up such interesting directions with these characters, only for all of it to go out on such a standard note, amounts to a fairly disappointing blockbuster. Scoring on the Factor Facts, I give Avatar Fire and Ash a begrudging 64%. That's a wrap. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this review helpful. Like and share, subscribe for more. This is Pop Culture. I'm Alex Pop.